The ballroom at Ravenscroft Manor shimmered beneath the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, their delicate prisms scattering fragments of light like stars caught within gilded cages. Candle flames flickered, casting playful shadows across the polished marble floors, illuminating the carefully arranged bouquets of roses and lilacs that punctuated every corner. The scent of wax and flower mingled, an intoxicating perfume that seemed to thrum in rhythm with the orchestra's lilting strains. Lady Eleanor Whitmore, her heart a drum of apprehension, moved hesitantly through the crowd, her skirts brushing the polished floors, every step measured against the invisible rules of propriety that governed her station. She had been raised to appear serene, to speak softly and with measured grace, yet tonight the weight of expectation pressed upon her like the stiff corset encasing her delicate frame. From the moment she entered, Eleanor sensed the eyes of society upon her, a quiet wave of judgment rolling beneath polite smiles. Whispers grazed her ears, innocuous at first, then sharpened by curiosity and mild disdain. A gown too pale, a hair too loose, a posture insufficiently upright, each observation magnified within the strict confines of the ball. Eleanor's cheeks burned, a bloom of crimson against her fair skin, and she forced a graceful curtsy before the nearest cluster of observing ladies. "A most charming display, Lady Eleanor," one of them murmured, though the faintest smirk betrayed amusement rather than admiration. Eleanor forced a polite smile, her pulse quickened, and she wondered how she could maintain composure in this world where a single misstep carried weight far beyond its measure. It was then across the room that she first saw him, the Duke of Ravenscroft. A figure of commanding presence, he stood near the marble staircase, hands lightly clasped behind his back, eyes scanning the ballroom with the precision of one accustomed to both scrutiny and isolation. Dark hair gleamed beneath the chandelier's glow, and a shadow of melancholy seemed to veil his features. The room's laughter and music seemed not to touch him. He was a world apart, yet entirely central to the orbit of everyone present. Eleanor felt an inexplicable tug at her attention, a mixture of fear and fascination. The whispers of the court had long painted him as distant, inscrutable, and yet undeniably magnetic, a man whose presence drew both admiration and speculation in equal measure. Their eyes met briefly. A flicker of recognition, though Eleanor could not name the source, passed between them. It was as if the Duke had perceived the tremor of her spirit beneath the carefully arranged composure of her outward appearance. And then, as though drawn by necessity rather than courtesy, he approached. The crowd seemed to part silently, almost reverently, as his polished boots traced the marble floor. Eleanor's breath caught, her hand clutching the folds of her gown for steadiness, and the space between them narrowed with a quiet inevitability. "Do not look at me," he murmured, a statement both startling and cold, yet framed in the calm politeness demanded by society. There was no malice, yet the words carried weight, a warning steeped in something older and far more complicated than mere vanity. Eleanor shivered, a tremor she could neither conceal nor understand, for the Duke's gaze seemed to pierce beyond the shallow surface of appearances into something more vulnerable, more human. She wanted to speak, to ask why such a man, esteemed and feared, would concern himself with her glance, yet decorum, the invisible chains of her upbringing, held her tongue in place. The Duke's attention shifted subtly, a measured bow, and then he turned, leaving Eleanor with a swirl of silk skirts and the echo of whispered speculation. Conversations resumed, laughter tinkled, and the orchestra strings swelled in an undulating rhythm, yet Eleanor's mind remained tethered to the encounter. Who was this man who could command silence with a glance, whose very presence seemed to redefine the boundaries of the room? And what secret weighed so heavily upon him that even a fleeting look was forbidden? As the evening continued, Eleanor navigated the social terrain with the cautious grace of one aware that every gesture might be dissected. Yet even amidst the formal introductions and measured curtsies, her curiosity lingered persistently. The Duke's warning haunted her, not as a threat, but as an invitation into a realm of understanding far beyond the surface politeness of society. It was a riddle wrapped in a man of quiet authority, and Eleanor felt the first spark of determination to unravel it. The orchestra shifted to a waltz, the melody winding like smoke through the candlelit air, and Eleanor found herself gently guided into the movement by a distant cousin, whose eyes never quite reached hers as her thoughts remained elsewhere. She spun, her reflection mirrored in polished surfaces, and glimpsed once more the Duke, standing near the grand staircase, observing with a quiet intensity. For a fleeting moment, he appeared less like the aloof aristocrat and more like a man burdened by unseen chains, his posture taut with restraint. Eleanor's heart ached with a mixture of empathy and inexplicable longing, a yearning she scarcely understood. Even as society demanded performance, smiles, courtesy, restrained laughter, Eleanor felt the stirrings of something ungovernable within her own heart. She realized that the Duke's distance was not a rejection of her, but a barrier erected by circumstance, duty, and perhaps a secret that demanded silence. And though the evening's light would fade and candles burn low, the image of his shadowed gaze lingered in her mind, a specter of intrigue and an unspoken challenge. The ballroom continued its grand performance, yet Eleanor's awareness had shifted. Every whispered word, every subtle glance, and every carefully curated gesture of the aristocracy became part of a tapestry she now viewed with sharper understanding. The evening was no longer merely a stage for observation. It had become a crucible in which character, courage, and curiosity were tested. She sensed that the Duke's warning was the first of many, and that the path to understanding him, and perhaps to her own awakening, would require patience, attentiveness, and a courage she had not yet fully summoned. As the clock's chimes echoed through the estate, Eleanor retreated to the quiet of the veranda for a moment's reprieve. Cool night air brushed her cheeks, carrying the scent of gardenia and evening dew, and she allowed herself a deep inhalation of clarity amid the swirl of society's expectations. Somewhere within the layers of duty, secrecy, and whispered scandal, she sensed a story unfolding, one whose outcome was as uncertain as it was compelling. And though the Duke had left her without explanation, the encounter had planted the seed of intrigue, a quiet insistence that she would not forget his presence, nor the intensity that lay behind his words. She returned to the ballroom as the final notes of the waltz lingered, and though polite laughter resumed around her, Eleanor's mind remained occupied by the man who had warned her so distinctly. The evening would pass as all evenings do, yet in the quiet chambers of her mind she rehearsed each glance, each syllable, and each tremor of feeling. The Duke's presence, his warning, and the enigmatic tension it inspired were the first threads of a story she would follow with unwavering attention, a story whose unfolding promised both challenge and revelation. And so the night concluded with society's approval intact, yet Eleanor's heart beat to a different rhythm, one of curiosity, suspense, and the tentative beginnings of admiration and understanding. The Duke had shown her a sliver of his world, and in that brief, fleeting moment, she understood that the lives of the aristocracy, for all their outward perfection, were governed by secrets, restraint, and an unspoken longing that mirrored her own. And though no resolution had yet been reached, the stage was set for the intricate dance of trust, courage, and affection that would shape the chapters to come. In that glittering, candlelit ballroom, amid the strains of music and murmurs of polite conversation, a delicate understanding had been forged. Eleanor had seen the man behind the title, and the Duke, unknowingly, had marked her as a witness to a truth that would soon demand both courage and heart. The tension lingered, unresolved but electric, and as she prepared to withdraw from the room into the quiet of Ravenscroft's corridors, Eleanor felt the unmistakable stirrings of destiny, a story that would unfold slowly, with measured grace, and sweep both her and the Duke into the intricate tapestry of love, secrecy, and societal expectation. The days following the Ravenscroft ball were suffused with a quiet unrest. Lady Eleanor found her thoughts perpetually returning to the Duke, his dark eyes, and the cryptic warning that had so unsettled her. Each morning, the sun seemed to filter through her curtains with a sharper clarity, illuminating the confines of her chamber and the meticulous order of her life, a life now tinged with a newfound curiosity. Even the simplest activities, the arranging of ribbons in her hair or the careful folding of lace handkerchiefs, carried a subtle tension, as if her fingers themselves anticipated the next encounter. Her mind, trained to follow decorum and propriety, now wandered to possibilities unspoken, to motives hidden behind a composed exterior, and to the heavy weight of secrets that she sensed yet could not name. It was during a quiet afternoon walk in the estate gardens that the first token appeared. Eleanor had wandered among the neatly clipped hedges, past roses that bloomed with a vividness rivaling the late afternoon sun, when she noticed a small package, folded in delicate paper and tied with a ribbon of midnight blue, resting upon a marble bench. The handwriting was unmistakable, precise, angular, and commanding. With trembling hands, she untied the ribbon and opened the paper, revealing a single rare flower pressed carefully within. Its petals, still vibrant despite their captivity, seemed to convey a message beyond words. Eleanor's lips parted, a soft gasp escaping her as she realized that this was no mere gift. It was a declaration, restrained yet brimming with significance, a language known only to those willing to read between lines and gestures. Yet the garden, usually a sanctuary of serenity, carried whispers of caution. Servants passing by lowered their eyes and murmured subtle hints of gossip, snippets of conversations that Eleanor could not fully grasp but that hinted at the Duke's reputation. "It is said," one murmured to another, "that the Duke carries burdens invisible to us all. Misfortune follows his name, though none speak of it aloud." Eleanor's curiosity, sharpened by both fascination and a hint of apprehension, felt compelled to unravel these threads. What was the nature of his secret? How could a man so refined, so composed, live under the shadow of some invisible weight that demanded silence? As if summoned by her restless thoughts, the Duke appeared, emerging from the shadows beneath an arch of climbing ivy. His posture was the very picture of restrained elegance, every movement deliberate, every glance measured. "You wonder where reflection might serve better than curiosity, Lady Eleanor?" he said, his voice calm yet threaded with unspoken concern. There was no reproach, only a depth of attention that seemed to weigh upon her, compelling her to meet his gaze fully despite the caution her upbringing demanded. "I found your gift," Eleanor admitted softly, holding the flower as though it were both a balm and a spark of danger. He inclined his head slightly, neither confirming nor denying, but the briefest flicker of a smile crossed his otherwise solemn features. "Consider it a token of esteem, nothing more. And yet, perhaps, it conveys what words cannot risk." His eyes, shadowed and stormed with restraint, lingered on her expression, reading the delicate mix of curiosity, fear and fascination that danced across her features. In that moment, Eleanor understood that the Duke's restraint was not mere pride. It was a carefully maintained barrier against a world that could neither comprehend nor forgive the truths he bore. The days that followed were punctuated with such gestures, each one small yet laden with significance. A handwritten note left under her favorite book of poetry, a rare sketch of the estate gardens tucked within a bouquet of freshly picked lavender. Each communication elevated the tension, each act revealing layers of personality concealed behind aristocratic composure. Eleanor began to perceive that the Duke's distance was as deliberate as his approach, a dance choreographed to balance propriety with the stirrings of genuine connection. But society's scrutiny was unrelenting. At a gathering hosted by Lady Whitmore, whispers of scandal reached Eleanor's ears. The Duke's family, it seemed, had once been entwined in a controversy, a mismanaged inheritance, an estranged cousin, and rumors of debts that threatened the dignity of the name Ravenscroft. Eleanor listened, careful to hide the rapid beating of her heart, understanding for the first time that the Duke's stern warnings, his careful distance, and his measured gestures were not caprice but the result of obligations that extended beyond mere personal preference. The stakes were larger than attraction. They encompassed honor, reputation, and the careful maintenance of societal balance. During one evening stroll through the estate corridors, Eleanor found herself face to face with the Duke once more. The hall was quiet, illuminated by the amber glow of wall sconces that threw shadows upon the stone floors. "You appear determined to follow curiosity wherever it may lead," he observed, a hint of reproach softened by the warmth of his tone. "I am not so much determined as compelled," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, betraying the conflict between duty and desire. "There is something about you, something you conceal, that demands understanding." His eyes darkened, flickering with emotion, yet he maintained the perfect composure expected of a man of his rank. "There are matters," he said slowly, "that the world is neither prepared to witness nor willing to forgive. My path is constrained by burdens inherited, obligations that weigh upon every decision I make." Eleanor's heart ached at the depth of his restraint. The notion of a man so powerful, yet imprisoned by circumstance, evoked sympathy, admiration, and an inchoate longing she had yet to fully recognize. The tension between them escalated further through subtle encounters, a shared carriage ride through the rain-slick streets, each glance weighted with unsaid understanding, the delicate touch of a hand in passing, a fleeting brush that conveyed a promise unspoken. These moments, seemingly mundane to the unobservant, carried the charge of intimacy restrained by social expectation. Eleanor felt the stirrings of courage, a desire to pierce the veil of propriety, even as she respected the invisible walls erected by both duty and fear. At the culmination of the week, during a private supper in the Duke's study, a room lined with books, their spines gleaming in the firelight, he presented her with a rare edition of poetry, annotated in delicate script. Eleanor's fingers brushed the pages, noting the precision and care, understanding that this was not merely a gift, but a language of connection and trust. Each note, each observation in the margins, revealed a mind both cultured and burdened, a man striving to convey sentiment while preserving the decorum that society demanded. As Eleanor departed that evening, carrying the precious book and the echo of his carefully measured words, she felt a mingling of anticipation and apprehension. The Duke's secrets remained intact, concealed behind a facade of composure and elegance, yet his gestures had spoken volumes. The challenge before her was clear: to understand him, to navigate the intricate lattice of social expectation, and to balance curiosity with respect. The garden, once a sanctuary of simple reflection, had become a stage upon which the silent ballet of attraction and restraint unfolded. Each token, each note, each fleeting glance deepened the complexity of their interaction, weaving a tapestry of tension, longing, and unspoken understanding. Eleanor sensed that the story she was drawn into was far larger than a single evening or a single act. It was an intricate dance of honor, desire, and revelation, each movement calculated yet suffused with emotion. As she lay in her chamber that night, the rare flower pressed carefully into a book of poetry, Eleanor considered the path ahead. The Duke's distance was no longer a barrier but a challenge, a test of patience, discernment, and courage. She understood that the coming days would demand both subtlety and boldness, that societal expectations and personal inclination would collide, and that every gesture, word, and glance would carry significance. And yet, beneath the apprehension, a quiet hope took root, a hope that understanding, and perhaps something more profound, could emerge from the careful interplay of secrecy and trust. With the night air brushing the window pane and the distant toll of a clock marking the passage of hours, Eleanor felt the first stirrings of determination. She would seek knowledge of the Duke's secret, not out of recklessness, but from a sense of connection, empathy, and curiosity that demanded satisfaction. The stage was set for discoveries, for revelations that would challenge both heart and mind, and for the delicate unfolding of a story in which courage and propriety, longing and restraint, would intertwine in a narrative as intricate as the chandeliers that had first illuminated their meeting. And as the firelight waned, casting shadows upon the chamber walls, Eleanor whispered a silent promise to herself. She would not shy from the path that curiosity had opened, nor from the man whose gaze had unsettled her soul. The coming days would test the limits of patience, discretion, and emotional fortitude, yet she welcomed the trial. For in the measured cadence of secret gifts, fleeting gestures, and whispered truths, she glimpsed a story yet unwritten, a story she was determined to follow, step by delicate step, into the heart of Ravenscroft itself. The evening air was cool, heavy with the scent of rain-soaked roses, as Lady Eleanor ascended the steps to the terrace overlooking the sprawling Ravenscroft estate. The moon hung low, its silver light painting the manicured gardens in pale hues, and the distant chime of the estate's clocks echoed like a solemn accompaniment to her thoughts. Every detail seemed magnified: the soft rustle of her skirts against the stone floor, the faint creak of the wrought iron railing beneath her fingertips, the gentle sigh of wind through ivy-laden archways. Eleanor's heart beat with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension, for she knew that tonight would bring a confrontation, a revelation carefully postponed, yet necessary, between her and the enigmatic Duke whose presence had unsettled her very being. He was already there when she arrived, leaning lightly against the balustrade, the shadows of the terrace cloaking his figure in mystery. The flickering lanterns cast his features in alternating light and darkness, emphasizing the angular lines of his face and the quiet strength of his posture. He turned at her approach, and in that instant, Eleanor felt the familiar tug of tension that had accompanied every encounter since their first meeting at the ball. There was no flourish of grandeur, no forced politeness, only a presence both commanding and vulnerable, an intricate balance between authority and restrained emotion. "Lady Eleanor," he said softly, his voice carrying the calm precision of one accustomed to command, yet threaded with a subtle unease. "You have ventured far to speak with me." "I wish to understand," she replied, her own voice trembling slightly despite her attempts at composure. "I cannot ignore the weight in your eyes, nor the distance in your manner. There is something you conceal, something that shapes every word, every gesture." His gaze lingered upon her, and for a moment, the carefully constructed barrier of propriety faltered. He straightened, the faintest tremor betraying a storm beneath his calm exterior. "You speak with honesty, yet I fear the knowledge you seek may prove more burdensome than enlightenment." His words were deliberate, measured, yet each syllable carried the gravity of experience and the echo of long-held restraint. Eleanor stepped closer, drawn by the magnetic pull of his presence. "I am willing to bear the burden, should it illuminate your truth," she whispered, her eyes reflecting both resolve and vulnerability. The moonlight danced upon her features, highlighting the determination in her gaze, and in that instant the Duke's composure softened, revealing a depth of humanity she had not yet fully perceived. He gestured toward the terrace chairs, and they seated themselves side by side, the quiet of the night wrapping around them like a protective cloak. "There are chains," he began, his voice low and steady, that bind a man not by choice but by circumstance. My family's past, it is marred by errors not wholly of my making, yet their consequences linger, shaping every step I take. Reputation, obligation, legacy, these are the burdens I cannot lay aside, no matter how fervently I might wish it. His words carried a weight beyond the immediate, a gravity that spoke of generations and decisions made long before either of them had entered the world. Eleanor listened intently, each carefully spoken phrase deepening her understanding of the man before her. She perceived the careful layering of duty and restraint, the delicate equilibrium between personal desire and societal expectation. Then it is not vanity that forbids my glance, she said softly, but the weight of circumstance itself. Her voice, though gentle, carried a certainty that seemed to resonate with him, acknowledging both his struggle and his dignity. He inclined his head, a shadow of relief passing through his eyes. You understand more than most, he murmured. Yet understanding does not always equate to resolution. There are forces beyond even my influence, decisions made by those no longer present, that dictate the boundaries within which I must act. The melancholy in his tone was palpable, yet there was also a glimmer of connection, a recognition that Eleanor, despite her youth and the fragility imposed by society, might stand as an ally to the truth he guarded so fiercely. The night deepened and a soft breeze stirred the terrace, carrying with it the scent of jasmine and damp earth. Eleanor reached for his hand, a tentative gesture, and he did not withdraw. Instead, his fingers brushed against hers, a delicate acknowledgement of trust, a shared understanding that transcended words. It is rare, he said quietly, to find one willing to see the man beneath the title, to grasp the burden without judgment. I am not afraid of truth, she replied, meeting his gaze with unwavering courage. Even if it challenges all that I have been taught about propriety and discretion. Her words, though restrained, conveyed a depth of empathy and a quiet bravery that pierced the careful armor he had maintained for so long. For a time, silence settled between them, filled only by the distant rustle of leaves and the faint murmur of the estate beyond. In that shared quiet, Eleanor felt a profound connection, a bridge forming between curiosity and understanding, longing and restraint. The Duke, for his part, allowed the moments to linger, absorbing the sincerity in her eyes and the courage in her presence. He sensed that, for the first time in many years, someone might comprehend the complexity of his existence without seeking to alter or condemn it. Finally he spoke again, his tone tinged with both vulnerability and resolve. There is a truth I have never voiced aloud, not for want of trust, but for fear of consequence. My family's legacy carries both honor and disgrace, intertwined in ways that have dictated the course of my life. To reveal it fully is to invite scrutiny, perhaps censure, and yet to conceal it entirely would deny the very connection I now sense between us. He paused, the weight of his confession settling like a mantle across the terrace. Eleanor's hand, still lightly held within his, conveyed an unspoken promise. Then speak, if only to lighten your burden, she urged gently. I will not falter, nor will I judge. There is strength in truth even when it is difficult to bear. He drew a deep breath, the shadows of his past and the burdens of expectation flickering across his features. Very well, he said, his voice steadying. Know that the secret I guard is one of circumstance and consequence rather than vice. A misfortune in my family's history, a misunderstanding that has been repeated and magnified by time, has shaped the perception of Ravenscroft's name. I have lived under its shadow, careful to preserve dignity while contending with whispers of disapproval and caution. Eleanor listened, each word deepening her admiration and compassion. She perceived that the Duke's reserve was not arrogance but the careful measure of a man navigating the intricate lattice of societal expectation and personal integrity. Her respect for him grew, interwoven with an awakening awareness of her own feelings that demanded both courage and discretion in equal measure. The night air deepened further, and the estate seemed to retreat into quiet reverence, leaving the terrace a sanctuary of understanding and restrained intimacy. You are remarkable, he said finally, his eyes reflecting both gratitude and quiet awe. Few would extend such patience, such empathy without hesitation. I am not accustomed to such trust. I am not here to judge, Eleanor replied, her voice gentle but firm. I am here to understand, to see you as you truly are, beyond whispers, beyond expectation. Her words hung between them, luminous with sincerity, as if the moonlight itself had lent them its clarity. As the evening drew to its quiet conclusion, the Duke rose, bowing slightly yet with a gravity that conveyed profound respect. Eleanor followed his gesture with a graceful inclination of her own. The night had revealed truths unspoken, intimacies acknowledged, and a bond forming upon a foundation of trust and courage. Though the Duke's secret remained partially veiled, the veil was thinner now, and the path to deeper understanding lay open, illuminated by moonlight, empathy, and the quiet stirrings of a connection that defied both fear and convention. As Eleanor retreated to her chamber, the terrace and gardens fading behind her, she carried with her the weight and warmth of the evening's revelations. The Duke's confession had not fully resolved the mysteries of his existence, yet it had created a bridge, delicate, tentative and radiant, between two souls constrained by society yet drawn inexorably toward one another. And though the journey ahead promised challenges, uncertainty, and the ever-watchful eyes of the world, Eleanor felt the first true stirrings of hope, courage, and anticipation for the unfolding story that neither time nor circumstance could easily suppress. The first light of dawn filtered through the high windows of Ravenscroft Manor, spilling across the polished floors and slender beams that caught upon gilded frames and the delicate embroidery of Lady Eleanor's gown. The estate, usually alive with the stirrings of servants and distant carriage wheels, seemed suspended in reverent stillness, as though the world itself held its breath for the events unfolding within its walls. Eleanor moved quietly through the corridors, her thoughts a tumult of anticipation, lingering doubt, and a fragile courage that had been tested and refined in the days and nights preceding this moment. The secret, long guarded and partially revealed, hung between her and the Duke like an unspoken promise, a challenge to be met with equal measures of patience, understanding, and heart. She found him in the library, a sanctuary of dark mahogany shelves and the faint, comforting scent of parchment and wax. The fire had burned low overnight, leaving glowing embers that cast a warm, trembling light upon his features. He looked up as she entered, and in that instant, the years of restraint, burden, and guarded composure seemed to fall away, leaving a man both human and magnificent in his vulnerability. Eleanor's pulse quickened, her gaze sweeping across the room, taking in the familiar volumes, the scattered notes, and the quiet dignity of the man she had come to understand, admire, and, she admitted to herself now, love. "Good morning, Lady Eleanor," he said, his tone gentle yet deliberate, carrying the faint tremor of nerves restrained beneath the surface. "You have come early." "I could not wait," she confessed, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "There are truths I must share and moments I cannot defer. The days of quiet observation are behind us, are they not?" Her words hung in the firelit air, deliberate, poetic, and imbued with a courage born of deep reflection and unwavering empathy. The Duke studied her, a subtle mixture of admiration and uncertainty flickering across his features. "You speak with resolve, yet you tread upon delicate ground," he replied, his voice soft but measured. "The world beyond these walls is less forgiving than you perceive. My life, constrained as it is by both reputation and circumstance, offers little freedom from scrutiny." Eleanor stepped closer, her eyes locking with his. "I do not fear scrutiny," she said firmly. "Nor do I wish to alter you. I seek only to walk beside you, to understand and support you, even in the shadows cast by the past." The sincerity in her tone, coupled with the steady confidence in her gaze, seemed to dispel some of the weight that had long pressed upon the Duke's shoulders. For the first time he appeared not as a man burdened by history, but as one capable of hope, connection, and choice. He rose, closing the distance between them in a few measured steps, his presence both commanding and gentle. "And yet," he said, a quiet tremor in his voice betraying the depths of emotion restrained for so long, "it is not only the world's judgment I fear. It is the vulnerability that comes with trust, the relinquishment of control that binds a man accustomed to guarding both name and heart." Eleanor extended her hand, a simple yet profound gesture of invitation and courage. "Then relinquish it," she urged softly. "For what is control when weighed against honesty, understanding, and love?" The firelight glimmered in her eyes, illuminating the intensity of her conviction, and in that moment the Duke perceived the truth of her words, not as a challenge but as an offer, tender yet unwavering. For a long, suspended moment, he regarded her, the tension between caution and desire etched in every line of his features. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers, an act that spoke of trust, acknowledgement, and a willingness to embrace both heart and uncertainty. "Lady Eleanor," he said, his voice low, resonant with emotion, "you have seen beyond the barriers I have erected, beyond the careful composure demanded by title and duty. You have perceived the man beneath, the one who fears consequence yet longs for connection. And for that I owe you more than words can convey. Tears, unbidden and yet welcomed, welled in Eleanor's eyes, reflecting the soft firelight. "Then speak plainly," she implored, her voice quivering with both anticipation and affection. "Let the truth of your heart be revealed, unguarded and unafraid." The Duke drew a steadying breath, the full weight of his legacy and restraint pressing upon him even as he embraced the moment. "I have loved you," he confessed, each word deliberate, carrying the weight of decades of caution, secrecy and longing. "I have resisted, restrained and measured every interaction, yet my heart has known a singular truth. You, Lady Eleanor, are the one I have sought, even when duty and circumstance dictated distance. And now I can resist no longer." Eleanor's breath caught, a tremor of joy and relief coursing through her. "And I you," she whispered, the words carrying both promise and affirmation. "I have understood, waited and chosen as well. Not for society, not for expectation, but for the man I have come to know and admire. The Duke and the man he hides within are one and the same in my eyes." The room seemed to dissolve around them, leaving only the firelight, the warmth of shared conviction, and the profound understanding that had taken weeks, months perhaps, to crystallize. Every restraint, every unspoken word, and every gesture of cautious connection culminated in this moment, delicate yet powerful, fragile yet unbreakable. He stepped closer, their foreheads almost touching, the gentle warmth of proximity mingling with the unspoken exhilaration of shared confession. "Then we walk forward together," he said, his voice barely above a whisper yet resolute, bound not by obligation alone, but by understanding, respect, and the courage to face both the past and future side by side. Eleanor nodded, her heart swelling with the quiet triumph of courage met and desire fulfilled. "Together," she echoed, her voice carrying a sweetness tempered by dignity and the awareness of the journey yet ahead. The remainder of the day unfolded in a soft glow of reconciliation, trust, and the gentle weaving of lives once constrained by circumstance. They spoke of hopes, of fears, and of the burdens long borne alone, now shared with mutual understanding. Laughter, tender and genuine, punctuated their conversation, filling the library with warmth that contrasted with the austere elegance of the room. In their dialogue, each learned not only of the other's heart but also of the resilience, patience and fortitude necessary to navigate a world so obsessed with propriety yet incapable of seeing the truth beneath its surface. As twilight approached, they walked together through the gardens, hand in hand, the setting sun painting the sky with strokes of amber and rose. The estate, once a backdrop to whispered speculation and guarded glances, had become a stage for affirmation, trust, and the quiet triumph of emotional courage. Every step was deliberate yet unburdened, a testament to the strength of a connection forged in restraint, understanding, and love. By nightfall, Eleanor and the Duke returned to the manor, the glow of lanterns guiding their path and casting their shadows long and intertwined upon the stone. Their hearts beat in measured unison, echoing the silent promise that this story, built on secrecy, longing, and restraint, had found its resolution at least for now, in the courageous acknowledgement of shared affection. As they entered the estate, the weight of the past remained present but no longer insurmountable. Secrets, burdens, and societal expectation would always linger, yet the bridge of trust and understanding they had forged promised resilience, intimacy, and a future unshaken by fear. And in that luminous moment, the Duke and Lady Eleanor recognized a truth that would endure beyond the fragile confines of propriety, that love, tempered with patience and courage, could triumph over even the most carefully guarded constraints. The night settled gently around Ravenscroft Manor, the stars twinkling like witnesses to a union of hearts strengthened by both adversity and devotion. And in the quiet of the library, the terrace and the gardens beyond, Eleanor and the Duke embraced the new day of their lives, ready to face the world together, bound not by obligation alone, but by the enduring power of trust, understanding, and love.